go to the big building, right? Well, thank you all for being with us today. Tell me you all are ready.
I'm good.
You good?
Sweet. Yep.
Randy, you good?
I'm ready.
Well, as we invite you here to talk about the Biden's vaccination plan for private businesses, I've spent several days now discussing the negative effects of the Biden administration's recent executive order that requires all private businesses with employees of 100 or more to be vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine, or they're going to be subject to a massive fine. And our small businesses, as you all know and you've reported on many times, have been absolutely crushed during this pandemic. And it's due now to the weight of the federal bureaucracy that we're seeing that our small businesses now need help more than ever. They've had to have the federal government take eminent domain of their revenues through government shutdowns from different states based on the color of the political map. They've been threatened with crippling taxes as they gasp for air and attempt to recover from this lackluster economy. They had even their workforce be paid tax dollars, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, to stay home when there were millions and millions of now hiring signs across businesses across America. And like most instances in a free market, small businesses have been leading the way in creativity, ingenuity, and innovation, and overall best practices during this COVID era. The executive order will only further hinder small business productivity and wreak havoc on the workforce during an economic time where workers are already scarce. They've had enormous pressure put on them. And how does the government show appreciation to them? By implementing more punitive regulations. Not only is this executive order in violation of our small business owners' rights as private entities, but it also intrudes on doctor-patient relationship of individual employees across America and here in Oklahoma. The Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, otherwise known as OSHA, is set to issue an emergency temporary standard, an ETS, to implement President Biden's vaccine mandate in the coming days. This approach ensures that the normal rulemaking procedures will be circumvented temporarily, while as many as 80 million Americans and thousands of businesses will be forced into compliance before they even have the ability to comment to their government. Those who do not comply will suffer massive fines, upwards of $14,000 per violation, per person, per visit. This will put businesses in a difficult way and cause financial hardships that will be unrecoverable. All because we want to look at companies that have 100 employees or more. One would argue that this is only the first step. What about the businesses that have 99 employees? What about the businesses that have 20 locations and 5 employees per location? This is completely taking out the authority of the private businesses to manage their businesses as they see they should, and as how this country has always allowed them to do. Over the past few days, I've received a clear message from small business and individual constituents across our district that this federal overreach will not be tolerated. That is why I'm announcing today a number of steps on behalf of my constituents and push back on this federal overreach. First, we will use the power of the purse that Congress has, where all funding should start and spending will start, and we will look at how we fund this implementation of this rule at the Department of Labor. It's the most imminent issue we have right now, and I, along with my colleagues across America, will do everything in our power to stop the funding of this. Second, we will look at every action possible as soon as the rule comes out, including up to legal action to push back on the Biden administration and their unconstitutional overreach as it relates to private business in America. While we're still waiting to see the final language of OSHA's standard based on the Biden administration's announcement, I believe there's plenty of evidence that gives us the authority to do this. So with that, I'll take any question you may have.
Okay, so you said we are going to look at every action possible. Who's we?
Well, we're going to employ, and we've been talking to legal teams, and also there are other members across the country. They're on the federal level, which is where my jurisdiction lies. And we've been in close contact and anxiously awaiting to see what President Biden's rules are going to be.
So, but I mean, is this the Republican conference? Is this you?
I believe there will be both Democrats and Republicans. As you may be aware, I also am the co-chair of the Small Business Caucus. And we'll be calling on members of that Small Business Caucus, which is very bipartisan, to step up and support who they represent, which are small businesses in America.
Some of these businesses employ unions, and some unions are pretty leery about having their members being forced into anything. Will you be having a discussion with any of these shows?
Every private business in America has been contacting us, whether they're a labor shop or a non-labor shop, because they're concerned, as you just described, about this government overreach. It's one thing to compete against your peer in your industry. It's another thing to compete against the federal government. And so we'll be representing any and all voices as it relates to private businesses in America.
So what sort of liability do you think businesses have if they don't insist on some kind of precautionary measures like vaccination? In other words, they don't require people to be vaccinated. I think the actual order is that they have to be vaccinated or tested, so they do have an option. But if companies aren't doing anything to protect their employees or their customers, are there legal or liability ramifications to that?
Well, again, that will be up to the private entities to find out with their appropriate counsel. What we're discussing here is the constitutionality of this edict from the president, and that's what we're pushing back on. And if you know that the president knows that he's in a place where he knows it's going to be unconstitutional as well, just as we saw with the eviction moratorium and the CDC. He tries to use one of his agencies, as he's using the Department of Labor now. And all of the case studies he can cite are like schools and cities and communities and states. He doesn't cite any federal case study where the federal government, i.e. the President of the United States, has done these kind of edicts on private companies. So this is about the constitutionality of his actions. Private business, I was in private business for 35 years. That's why you employ great counsel to understand what your liabilities are, what positions you're being put in. And I'm not here to cast fault on anybody that's currently putting out vaccination requirements on all of their employees, not just 100 or more. We have small businesses that are doing it. We have large businesses that are doing it. But then the free will of the employee is, do they want to work there or not? And that's a whole other conversation for private business owners. And I would encourage them, if they want to speak to the press about their actions, then they should do so.
So what's the difference between this OSHA rule and an OSHA rule that says you have to wear a helmet or certain kind of shoes, or you can't, they've got a zillion rules. I'm sure you know all about that.
Well, this is about businesses protecting their employers in OSHA. What we're talking about now is the president going beyond that and saying that the people should protect themselves. This is a personal choice. Again, what we're knowing across America is smaller businesses that are under the 100 employees. While some will talk about, there are people already starting to leave and come to work for somebody under 100. They're causing, meaning the Biden administration is causing this false narrative that you're going to be okay there. But even those private businesses are concerned about the government overreach because they know that they are next. And another thing is this rule, based on what we know right now, and we haven't seen it, and I understand what you said, that it's about inoculations and testing, but we don't know that for sure. And there's some 80 million people in America that are going to be affected by this. And about half of those have had COVID, which a study just came out recently saying that if you've had COVID, that your natural immunity is 27 times greater than getting a vaccination. So the president is being a little disingenuous and in haste of not allowing private industry to do what they're doing right now, and many of them are requiring the vaccinations. But the end of the day, again, we're talking about the constitutionality of his actions because we're concerned where this leads going next. And at the end of the day, when the pandemic goes away, and we all hope and pray that day is very soon, the Constitution of the United States of America has to survive.
Of the 3 shots that are available, how many of them have been approved by the FDA and how many are still under emergency?
Well, obviously the Pfizer has been Moderna, and then we've got the J&J, the 1 shot. I personally had the Pfizer shot back in December and January after advice and talking to my doctor. And as I've said from day one, my encouragement to those who have not been vaccinated is to go talk to your physician and to see if there is a concern that you have, that he or she, your doctor, can take that concern, that fear away.
Is there anything you think that the president or the federal government can legally do, but other than what it's already doing to try and get people to be vaccinated?
Well, I think that's a great question, Randy. I think if you actually back up to see what the federal government has done since early last year when we first got our first case of COVID-19, which was in February, we believe now, of 2020. And then President Trump literally spent billions of dollars setting up and doing Operation Warp Speed, something that had never been done in the history of our country, to create a vaccine through messenger RNA with Pfizer and Moderna. And then getting that done within 10 months, which usually takes 4 to 5 years. And I will remind everyone that during that time, then candidates Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said they would not take the vaccination because it was a President Trump vaccination. And now today, they're going so far beyond that and trying to create an unconstitutional action in mandating that private businesses be vaccinated. So one might argue, had President Trump won again, would there have been any Democrat in America vaccinated today based on their nominee, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and the actions that they were talking about and saying along the campaign trail?
Okay, but be that as it may, is there anything, now that apparently they think the vaccines are okay,
well,
do?
What we've done is we've spent literally tens of billions of dollars making it available not only to people across the United States, it's prevalent everywhere. Along with the testing that we did, we spent trillions of dollars in the COVID care monies to make sure we had testing stations across America. And not only that, we were sending vaccinations around the world to make sure that countries like Taiwan and South America and other countries in North Africa could have vaccinations to help not only people in America, but also those others around the world. We good?
I have one more that's not necessarily related to this, but it is related to business.
Okay.
Back in July, Mr. Biden apparently asked the telecom industries that have SMS texting to monitor texts of individuals and businesses to see if there was any, in his words, improper information regarding COVID being transmitted over these lines. A lot of people thought that was a joke. A radio station I once worked for in Illinois just had their text service suspended because callers into the radio station oftentimes text into the radio station. And they were simply asking questions about COVID this, COVID that, and because they deemed on their own, I guess, that there was some misinformation, the service was interrupted. First of all, are companies such as these carriers, are they allowed to go in and start taking a look at what everybody's transmitting?
I'm not aware. I mean, I know what you're talking about, the original conversations about them reaching out to the social media companies like Facebook and others and criticizing them. But as far as the text messages, obviously they would have to go through some of our big service providers, some of the larger telecom companies, which would obviously be done through some of our alphabet soup folks up in Fort Meade area. But I haven't seen the latest comments that you said there. So if you can get that to our staff, we'll
I
check into
did.
that.
I just sent that
Okay,
before I
good.
came here, and I hope you get a chance to look at
That'd
it.
be great.
sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I was going to ask, I have to say I've been a little surprised. I thought there would be at least some businesses who were maybe privately glad to have this mandate such as it is, because it'd give them some cover to do what they wanted to do but were afraid to on their own. Have you heard from anybody like that?
We've talked to all kinds of businesses, and to businesses just as you described. We have businesses here in the 1st District and across the state, and actually across the country that I've talked to, that probably privately, that's probably a fair statement. I'll let them describe that to the press when they want to. But they also know that just because a president comes out and puts this edict out, this unconstitutional edict, it doesn't change the heart and soul and the mind of the person who feels like they've been pressured to do something that's outside of their personal freedoms. And, again, if a business wants to do that as part of their operating guidelines, that's one of the things you get to do. You get to see the pros and cons of that. And again, we have companies that have 100 employees, let's say, that all work tightly in a warehouse and they're very close proximity to one another, that have chosen to do that. And then we have other companies that have 200 or 300 that are scattered out everywhere that have chosen not to. And because of those particular decisions, those employees will have the ability to either stay in those jobs and understand, based on the communications of those companies, those private companies, or why they're doing that. And if they feel good about why they're having to get vaccinated, then they will stay. And if not, they will go somewhere else. And the reality is that, we have about 60% of Americans that are vaccinated now, and we have another 25% that have had COVID, and some of those obviously are the same. But I know the American people, and many are concerned about the confusion that they're hearing, that if you're vaccinated, you're okay. And if you're vaccinated, you can also carry. And if you've had COVID, then you're 27 more times inoculated, if you will, with the antibodies than if you actually had the shot. And yet we still have the people that ought to be the most fearful in all this are the folks that are the unvaccinated, not the people that are the vaccinated. And so we are, again, we're going to be continuing to push back on President Biden and his actions as more information comes out. And right now we know, even in the 1st District and across the country, that more and more people are getting the vaccinations every single day. So by the time that this rule comes into play and we have the opportunity to push back, it will be November. And at the current rates, the president wanted to be at 70% by July 1st. And he didn't make that goal by any stretch of the imagination. But again, they're not counting in, as many of my colleagues have said, both the Democrat and Republican, they're not counting in the some 40 million that have already had COVID.
Well, all I know is what the doctors here say, which is like 90 or 95% of the people who are showing up at the hospital haven't been vaccinated. Is there any reason to doubt that, you think?
I don't know. We have talked to them. I've talked to them. I've heard the same thing. And first of all, I want to say this to our frontline workers. And I've said this on a number of occasions. I've visited with nursing facilities. I've visited with doctors. Just thank you so much for what you have been doing for all of those who have been inflicted with the COVID-19 virus. Our nurses have worked long hours. And I know that they are pushing hard and telling everybody they can that the vaccination is the way to go. And I'm sure some of their influence is why more people are getting vaccinated. It's certainly not people like the President of the United States or even me talking from a podium. They're not doing that because I'm saying that. They're doing it because their medical doctor, their personal physician is telling them that they either should get one or they shouldn't. And there are a lot of folks who are compromised by immunity type issues or their cancer, where they can't get the shots, and so they shouldn't be forced or mandated to it, and they shouldn't lose their job because they can't.
Can I ask you about the Medicare amendments from yesterday or the day before? What those? I know you guys sent out a kind of a summary, but I didn't quite grasp it.
Sure.
So what are you trying to do there, other than draw attention to the fact that Medicare's got about 5 years left on its
Yeah, so the way,
Projection.
so if you think about Medicare, Medicare has a checking account and a savings account, and so we take money out of the savings and we put it in our checking account, and we write the prescribed or mandated benefits that we have right now across America. And by 2023, 2024, right, it keeps fluctuating a little bit because it's based on worker payroll taxes. And we're seeing that kind of change right now again with what's going on in the workforce. But in 23, we're going to have a 21% cut because we're going to deplete all the money in our quote savings account. And that's not from me, that's from the Medicare Trust Fund. And then we're going to have the same issue happen will happen with Social Security if we don't make some corrective actions there as well. And the last time that we made real structural changes in those was some 40 years ago. And the workforce has changed, and so has the age of the population.
So what I understand is one or two of the things that you had in there were to try and preserve the Medicare Advantage program.
Yes.
So what's the Social Security or the CMS cost, basically the taxpayers' cost or the government's cost for the Advantage versus the traditional?
Yeah, so there's some opportunities to clean it up, but it's also privately competitive on this Medicare Part C. A and B are the traditional Medicare that we've known forever, and then Part D is obviously the pharmaceutical component of that. But Part C is the privatized part of Medicare. And we want to structurally change that as well a little bit, where the pharmaceutical companies have to participate, even put some money in there. They have to be more involved. Right now, that's funded through a benchmark structure where they go in and look at the services they're providing. So they bid out these services. It's also a network where physicians of all areas, all disciplines, will bid some of these contracts. And based on Medicare Advantage's ability to beat that benchmark, they can put some of those monies, or all of those monies, they put them back into services. So one of the amendments that was being pushed in there is to add on top of Medicare A, was to add in there dentist to give for dental. And you're getting a 10% benefit. Well, you already get, because of the efficiency of Medicare Advantage, almost about 40% of Americans are in Medicare Advantage. They already get those benefits of dental, vision, and hearing at about a 90 to 95% rate. So they would actually lose benefits if this part was to pass the Senate and signed by the president.
Well, they would take that piece out of and by the way, full disclosure, I'm a recent member of Medicare Advantage, but recent, yeah, but within the past month. But so that you would no longer have that in the Part C, but you would have it in Part A.
It would actually be curtailed because of the benchmarking process, and because it's becoming so late into the benchmark analysis time. It would not get into the 2022 benchmark, so it would not even be considered. So that would not it would take away the opportunity for Medicare Advantage to have extra monies to plow back into these extra services. The question is whether or not they'll actually be able to get it into the 2022 2023 benchmark, because they have to have it in 2022. A lot of dates going on here, but it's the timing of when this ultimately passes. And so it could be that Medicare Advantage is at a disadvantage until 2024 on the ability to give folks that are in there these great benefits at a significantly reduced cost. Because what that does is it removes the necessity to have gap insurance.
So several years ago, the argument was that while Medicare Advantage was a better deal for me, or for the people, it also was costing the trust fund more. It was also a higher cost deal. Is that still the case, or is that no longer the case?
No.
Okay.
Last question.
We're good?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.